All right, apologies for our technical difficulty a little bit earlier. Now I'm looking at the audio deck that we have here, and it looks like we are unmuted, we are plugged in, we are ready to go. So I do apologize for that. That's why Diane handles the stream most of the time. But do want to talk to you a little bit about what we expect as we go into the next 24 hours here, with Wednesday being our main severe weather threat. We have adjusted that time frame to around 12 o'clock to 9 o'clock tomorrow, and it looks like as we go through the day, this may come in a couple of different parts. It looks like we have the potential to see sort of a first wave early in the afternoon that follows maybe some isolated to widely scattered precipitation that happens during the morning that we do not expect to be severe, and then we'll get a window from roughly about 12 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon where we get some showers and thunderstorms, maybe extending as far out as about 3 o'clock, and then eventually starting to get towards that 5 and 6 o'clock time frame where we expect sort of the second wave of this system. But as we go through tonight, we're not really seeing much. We've got a few isolated showers and storms that have been moving through parts of Huron County. It doesn't look like anything severe, and we certainly don't expect that to be the case as we go through the next several hours. However, what we are watching is this system that is currently out to the west of us that is mainly this cold front that you see right here. Kind of a messy surface map tonight, but what is going to happen with this frontal boundary that is stationary for the moment is it's going to drop a little bit further to the south as we go through tonight, and then what it's going to do as it drops south as a cold front, by definition it is going to lift back northward as a warm front as we go through the day tomorrow, and that warm front is likely going to heat us up. It is likely going to allow more humidity to come back into the picture, and that will of course act as fuel for our next round of showers and storms as we go through tomorrow. So the hour by hour forecast here. And please let me know if there are any audio issues. Again, for those of you who hopped on the first stream, hopefully this is now corrected. We do expect the possibility of at least a little bit of precipitation here and there as we start the first half of the day. Could be a little bit more widespread than what you're seeing here, but I think the message is that we're not expecting it to be the worst part of the storm system that comes through on Wednesday, so you might run into a little rain out the door. I think this is also something that could be something that happens during the first half of the day. We get some of these scattered showers and storms that develop out ahead of the warm front as it moves through. Those could have some downpours with them, but prior to noon, we're really not anticipating those to be severe. But here's one thing that I think we need to pay attention to, especially if you're around I-69 and to the north, and as you move into the Tri-Cities region, especially from around here towards I-69 up into around the Midland corridor right around US 10. I think it's during this time of the afternoon, this initial period from, again, about 12 o'clock until 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, as that warm front is sort of getting situated right in this area here. It looks like we may have some thunderstorm development that goes along that, and some of that thunderstorm development as it moves along the warm front, you can see some of that wind shift right here. Typically out ahead of warm fronts, we get that southeasterly wind flow, and behind it, we get more of a southerly or southwesterly wind flow. And anything that develops right around that wind shift as it starts moving along that warm frontal boundary, it may have a slightly better chance to cause some rotation. And so I think if we see more of a tornadic threat tomorrow, I would expect that's probably going to be during that early part of the event, towards the early parts of the afternoon, maybe as far out as about the mid-afternoon. Once we get past that, we do expect as we get closer to around 5 o'clock, we'll start to see more of this linear structure that develops here. And this linear structure and other linear structures that typically move through is we usually see those lead to more of a straight line wind threat. Now, one thing that you should know is even though wind threats are the primary concern in formations like this, you notice we get these little kinks along the line, and we've seen that in events before. This happens quite a bit every year that we go through these events in mid-Michigan, is we're more prone to these what we call QLCS type of tornadoes rather than supercell tornadoes. We get these little areas of rotation that happen in these little notches sort of on the backside of these lines, and so I think that's something that we'll have to watch for, similar to our previous event in May. The night that we had the St. Charles tornado and the night that we had the tornado in Atlas Township, and eventually we had that other one confirmed near Layton Corners. I'm not saying that this is going to be a carbon copy event, but it's to give you an idea that we don't necessarily need these big supercell thunderstorms that are sort of more photogenic when in pictures and more photogenic on the radar with their typical kind of comma shape. But it does look like we get these little areas of rotation that happen right along these line structures. And so we'll have to sort of play whack-a-mole with those if they develop and make sure that we're catching any potential for brief spin-ups as this line moves through. And then once it does, a little bit closer to around 7, 8, 9 o'clock tomorrow night, be prepared for some slight shifts in some of that timing. As we start getting closer to the late evening hours, the main line will start to move out, and then eventually what happens behind it will start to weaken as well. We expect a lot of what you're seeing on your screen as we get closer to midnight. I think a lot of this that you see here, we don't necessarily have to worry about that being severe once we get past the main show and that cold front comes through. So one thing I do want to show you is our map that shows rotation potential, and this is a storm feature that we call updraft helicity, and what it tells us is it tells us how likely some of these storms are to rotate. Now keep in mind, rotation can happen in a lot of different storms. It doesn't necessarily mean anything tornadic, but what it can mean is we have some stronger storms that will develop at times tomorrow afternoon, at least according to some of the data that we're looking at. And you notice that some of these little streaks that you see, these areas that are showing storms in this vicinity may have the potential to have some rotation. Notice where they're lining up. It is primarily around that same corridor that I talked about, right up through about Saginaw and Midland. I would include Bay City in that as well, and they sort of stay on that level right here. This one extends a little bit further up into Huron County, but they don't really get past US 10. And so what we're seeing is most of the actual potential for some of these rotating storms seems to be in the central and southern portions of the viewing area, which lines up pretty well with that severe weather outlook that we have tomorrow. And if I zoom out this map at least a little bit, you'll notice that enhanced risk is a little bit farther to the south as well. So it comes up to around Lansing or so, and that enhanced risk is the area of the state that has the highest chance of severe weather, but it is pretty close by, and it's pretty close to areas like Shiawassee County. It's close enough to areas like southern Gratiot and southern Saginaw County that I think we should pay attention to any updates that happen tomorrow. And it's also closer to Genesee County as well. It doesn't necessarily mean the Storm Prediction Center is going to make that change, but I do think it's close enough that it's worth watching for us, especially with the amount of heat and humidity that we have tomorrow and the way the wind is going to shift with some of that warm front potential as we go through the first part of that event. This is also the tornado outlook that represents what I think we were talking about pretty well too. That 5% risk, which doesn't happen very often for mid-Michigan. It's usually this 2% risk, but occasionally we get this a couple of times during the summer on a year that it's a bit more active, suggests that our risk is a little bit more elevated for any spinning storms in that brown shaded area. So I think if you're in that brown shaded area, you are in that potential tomorrow where I'm talking about that early part of the afternoon. If we can get some cells that sort of develop on their own or cells that happen within the vicinity of that warm front where that wind shift is, I think those storms would have the most likely chance to exhibit some rotation, especially early on before we start to shift to more of that straight line wind threat. Speaking of that wind threat, it's a little bit higher in that enhanced zone that's a bit farther to the south. It lines up pretty well with that orange shaded area. And it's in this red zone right here where we expect the best chance of the severe straight line winds, but we still have a pretty good chunk of mid-Michigan covered in the yellow area, which lines up with our slight risk. And so that's one of the reasons we think that is going to be our main threat, especially along that secondary line that develops sometime later tomorrow evening after we get past that initial wave during the early parts of the afternoon. And then we also have that hail outlook, which shows that we've got a slightly less lesser risk for hail over most of mid-Michigan, but still we've got those areas that are a little bit farther to the south, places like Gratiot and Shiawassee County and sections of Genesee County that seem to be a little bit more prone to a hail threat tomorrow than perhaps areas a little bit further to the north. One last thing, because we do have our 10 o'clock newscast coming up, one thing that I don't want to get lost in this for tomorrow is the fact that we do have an excessive rain outlook. And so with all of the heat and with all the humidity we have, we expect anything that comes through, whether it's severe or not, to have potential to be a pretty efficient rainfall producer. And so the excessive rainfall outlook, that's issued by the Weather Prediction Center, similar to how the Storm Prediction Center issues severe weather outlooks. So that excessive rainfall outlook just says, where do we have a risk of some areas getting some localized flash flooding? And it's anywhere that you see in that yellow shaded area where the risk is a bit more elevated. Does it mean that everybody in that region is going to see flash flooding? No, it does not. But what it does suggest is the possibility is there for anybody who gets some downpours for an extended period of time. You may pick up an inch or more of rain in a very short amount of time, and especially in areas that are a little bit drier right now. I know that's not for everybody. Some of our southern counties are a little bit more waterlogged. I do expect there to be that heavy rain that comes down onto more of that harder surface, that harder ground. And even though we have the room to absorb it, it may not absorb as quickly right away. And it may take some time. So we get runoff in those types of situations. We get a little bit of ponding on some area roads. So that is something that I think we need to watch going into Wednesday. Now, this is just a simulation here. This is not necessarily anything that I want you to take to the bank as far as a specific amount or a specific location, but I turned all the plots off on our rain predictor just to show you the little contour that's underneath, to show you the colors, and you can see how those random purple shaded areas pop up from time to time. Those purple shaded areas are where we could see some areas exceed that 1.5 inches of rainfall, maybe up to 2.5 inches of rainfall, where we get those really good downpours. So that is something, again, that I don't want to get lost in all of the discussion. You may not see severe weather in the form of wind, hail, or even an isolated tornado, but maybe you get some localized flooding instead just because you have some excessive rainfall. So there's a lot going on for tomorrow. But again, just coming back to me really quick, I'm going to have to cut off the live stream because we're going to have to do our 10 o'clock newscast, but I will take a look at some of the comments. And again, apologies for some of the technical issues that happened a little bit earlier. I will take a look at some of the questions that may have popped up or try to answer anything that you have put in the comments. However, I also want you to know that through tomorrow, we have a more seasoned person running our live stream, and Diane Phillips. She's going to be in with me during the afternoon. Meteorologist Stone Schaefer is going to be in here for the afternoon. So our live stream will be up and running tomorrow. We have tested it. It is ready to go. It was just my operator error tonight that the microphone wasn't working, so don't worry about that. And then, of course, if we have any severe weather pop up throughout the afternoon, we'll, of course, have some updates with that. If anything goes tornadic, we will pop in to programming on the air, and then we'll also have our live stream available on the air as well. And so you can get that on any form, whether it's YouTube, whether it's Facebook, any other streaming platform, we should be there for you. So I'm going to let this go for now, and thanks for joining, and we will talk to you soon.